I guess, and from that perspective, I think the big thing is helping share examples of what it's like just to be a guy. Understanding the things that they're going to potentially go through, the things they're going to see, everything. For me, it's going to be, I use social media for work and for some stuff, but they're having to live it day by day. So understanding what the impact of that can be, just not only short term, but long term, in terms of how that can impact their lives.
Yeah.
And then in terms of faith, it's really just setting the example and living it every day in front of them versus just telling them what to do and then sending them out to church or to faith formation, but then not doing anything personally.
Yeah.
So that's kind of really the setting that foundation.
Yeah, I guess I just add to trying to help them to be who they, who we want them to be in 5, 10, 15 years from now, right? And like, what is that step or progression that needs to happen in order to kind of get to where they, obviously they're not going to be experts in everything right now, right? But like, how do you help them to grow in those areas and teach them and kind of take it step by step each day, but kind of looking at that end long-term goal.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like it's ever evolving what my perspective is on being a father. My main thing is I just want to be present in my kids' lives and let them know that I love them. And then while doing that, be a good role model, set them up with all the tools I think they need to be successful adults and good citizens when they're older, and that, and then help them be aware of pitfalls that maybe I wish I was aware of growing up, but then ultimately know that they're going to have to stumble through some things on their own. And so it's very different with a daughter versus a son. So son, it's about being more of a male role model. Daughter, it's about setting her up for those traps that I think are going to be there for her as a girl, knowing how men can be and society can be. So there's a huge dichotomy there in terms of what I teach each sex or how I treat that. But just trying to do it with love and being present is really key for me.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I read that statistic, I believed it immediately and went, "Wow, I have a big job here, right?" And I knew that I believed it to be true because of my childhood. I mean, I was in a home where my mother, for whatever reason, stopped kind of taking us, and my dad stopped going, and it was like, all right, we don't have to go anymore. It was over. And then a male role model was who ultimately kind of challenged me back into the faith and became my confirmation sponsor. So it's like my past tells me that is true, right? But why specifically? I don't know. For me, it's all right. Well, in some aspects, I'm the leader of the family, and I think that dynamic exists. And it's different in the world today because there's a lot more equality between my wife and I. But still, I think that role, the father is seen as that role, maybe even instinctually. And so, if I'm not leading my family to church, we're not as apt to go. And so that's just our personal dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, my experience is kind of bizarre. So my dad was not born Catholic, but became Catholic before I was born, before they got married. And then a really good friend of mine who I grew up with, his dad literally just entered the Catholic Church after, I can't remember, it was like 57 years of marriage or something crazy like that. But my friend and most of his other 4 siblings, only one of them really stayed Catholic. The other 3 dropped. So the stat actually matches. Yeah. And the thing that was really interesting for me is this is back before all the legal stuff. My parents actually had high school youth ministry in the home. So as a kid, I would sit there and hang around the stairs on the split level, and I'd peek around and look at the high school kids and seeing how they're engaged in their faith. And my dad and mom led that together. And then both of them said, and I think this kind of goes back to maybe the shift. And so my dad was obviously the disciplinarian back then. So if dad said we're going to church, we're going to church. Not necessarily for all the right reasons, but I think ultimately, when children see both parents going, particularly the dad, they're like, okay, if the dad's taking this important because, maybe work's taking them away for travel and all that kind of stuff. And the moms, even when they work, the kids always expect them to be around, and I don't think that expectation is always there for dads. And so I think it's seeing that role model is really what reflects, and they're saying, hey, well, if this is important to him and he's willing to carve that out, then maybe I should too.
Yeah.
So God is love, right? And so I think it starts with that, and trying to make sure that everything that you do for or with your kids starts with that and coming from that place. And I think, as just with teaching and growing, trying to find, life is crazy and busy all the time, right? So trying to find those opportunities of teaching and teaching the faith coming from a place of love as well. So like, I don't know, my son was having a bad day yesterday, right? And so like, just at the end of the day, just laid with him in bed for a little while, and we just, had that time and that moment together. But we also were able to kind of talk about it and bring it back to God, and kind of have those conversations of faith for that time as well. So I think, yeah.
Yeah, I would just echo what Jake said. Just making God present in the daily discussions, and through example again is, what am I doing? Am I praying as well as leading the dinner prayer? And is God part of my daily life in discussion? There's lots of opportunities to not bring God into a morals discussion, or bring God into the morals discussion. And I just did that yesterday with my daughter, and so I think that really makes a difference, that it's not just church, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and with older teens, at least for boys, the other thing I've really started to learn is that you have to meet them where they're at, because they're both at so totally different places in their faith journey. My oldest is deep into Catholic, everything. He probably knows more than I do now. He's evangelizing Catholicism at a Church of Christ college down in Texas. The other one's kind of like, why do I go to church?
Yeah.
So really having different conversations with them and helping them understand how important it is, and be able to, how to phrase this, be open to answering really hard questions.
Yeah.
And if you don't know the answer, say, I'm going to go research it, I'm going to come back, and then we're going to have the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think it's kind of been a shift from when they were little to now. Now
Yeah.
the questions are much more challenging.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, the reason I think it's important is because, the relationship between myself and my wife is I believe a leading indicator of what my kids are going to think is normal and what they deserve, right? So I take it as a huge charge to lead by example, to show my daughter how she should be treated in her future marriage and what a good man looks like. And then same for my son, what does a good man look like on the other side?
Absolutely.
And you can very easily cross the line in either direction, and walk away from the right balance. So for me, it's this perpetual, what is that right balance of a man that is needed in the world today, but yet respectful and caring and treats his wife well. So my daughter knows what that looks like.
Yes.
And I probably step on both sides of the line constantly. But for me, I think it's a matter of just realizing that even amongst the need for equality doesn't mean loss of masculinity. And I think that's what society has really unintentionally done, is said, hey, it's okay for a man, and actually a man should be maybe more feminine and maybe overly open and overly sensitive, and that's what women want, and should give up the reins on leadership because we're an equal society. But I don't know that the marriage dynamic is really ready for that, nor do I think both sides of the couple really wants that.
Yeah, I agree.
And so as a man, it's like, wow, I gotta kind of deprogram everything I learned from sitcoms in the 90s and be a man, but be very respectful of my wife and very loving of her at the same time. So I don't get to be a jerk. That's not okay.
Right.
But I need to be firm in my beliefs and in what my role is, and then work through my wife to understand if I'm crossing a line too far, and maybe step back on some things, but lead forward on others. And so it's very challenging, but a charge that I feel we have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add too. I mean, I think in my dynamic, right, older boy, and then right now 2 younger girls. I try to do a lot right now to help have the son take care and watch after his sisters, right? Because I think that it's really important for males to be protective over people, right? And kind of when you see injustice, to speak out and talk about that and take care of others as you can, right? And so, I think it comes down to like different chores, like in the wintertime, right? Being like, hey, we have to clear the driveway off to make sure that nobody else slips and falls in the driveway, right? And like, that's why we're doing that in order to help take care of everybody else. And kind of trying to find those moments too of how do you increase in those virtues, and trying to be more stoic in certain ways too, right? Which I think is, obviously you have to deal with your emotions, right? You have to, but you also have to be calm and constant in seeing that, that there are going to be better days ahead, and that if things are trouble right now, we'll get through it and try to find a way. So I think it's that, and I think, just kind of echoing what you said there too, is just the difference between males and females, right, is a lot different how you raise your kids, and trying to see that, and trying to demonstrate it, but then also kind of demonstrate for your daughters of what a man should be and what they should be looking for in that role.
Yeah. Do you have any guesses?
I feel like it's demonstration of how to be treated is part of it, right? Kind of holding that standard for somebody you're going to be dating down the road of what you should be looking for, what qualities you should be looking for is part of it. But I don't know. I think it's. I was reading or heard one thing that said that it would be good for dads to approve of any any boy that their daughters would date, right? Because obviously you see it from a male perspective as far as is this person a good person, are they virtuous, are they going to take care of you the way they need to. But then on the flip side, it's actually better if a grandma is the one vetting the who a son dates. Grandma's better, just because they're further removed from that standpoint, and they're not worried about having babies. They're not worried about like grandbabies, and they're already at that point of. So
makes sense.
They have a better perspective.
Interesting.
I'll have to tell my mom that.
Yeah, exactly. So, anyways, but.
No, but I've watched. So some of my best friends down in Texas, actually, it's weird. The majority of them all had all girls, and there was the one thing that caught my attention is how, because I could observe, right? I didn't have any girls, so I'm just kind of watching, going, "No, this is really hard." First of all, but second of all, it was when the times got tough, when it wasn't related to something that was, I'll say, female oriented. They always went to their dad first. They're like, "Dad, how would you handle this situation? This guy asked me out, or I'm in this situation at school, or whatever the case was." And I didn't realize how innate that transition was until I started observing it. And I think watching how the dads reacted, and I was blessed that all these folks are deep in their faith. And they reacted in the form of love versus, let me get my gun out and clean it so you can determine if he's going to stick around or not.
Yeah.
We were down in Texas. But now looking, fast forward, some are married, some already have, serious boyfriends or fiancés, and they've all, when you look back, it's all that, how should I be treated? What should I look for in a guy? They all put their, we always put God first, but marriage before the kids was the mantra, because if the marriage is solid, then the kids will be solid. If you focus on the kids first, then when the marriage falls apart, you're not setting an example of what God intended. So that was kind of what I got to see.
Yeah, and I don't know if I have. I mean, I agree with what they're saying, and I don't know if I have a better answer or more to add. One thought I have that's maybe borderline sexist and can't make the video is I do believe there's just, in our history as human beings and in the Bible, there's this innate man as leader of the family dynamic, and I don't know that societally, I'm doing some reading, and it's like, I don't know if societally we can deprogram that, and so it may be something deep within the core of our daughters that just looks at us as the father, as the leader, and thus puts a lot more weight into what we're saying and doing and teaching. So I believe that that's a piece of it, which is why I'm trying to step up, as a man, and just make sure that I am fulfilling my role in that regard. Because whether whether I want it or not, it's there.
It's your
Like
job.
I'm being looked
Yeah.
at that way,
Yeah.
even when it's unclear that I might be, right?
Oh, you're being watched all the time.
Right, and it's, sometimes as couples you challenge each other, but it's,
Yeah.
so it's easy to back down and just be agreeable and not have fights, but I don't think that's what we're supposed to do, and so, just trying to embrace that aspect of who we are as human beings, and that men and women are different. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
fact.
it is
So,
a fact.
so I'm trying to own my role there. But then, I love the saying, I believe it goes, mothers, love your sons, raise your daughters, fathers, raise your sons, love your daughters. So I also have that within me where, okay, well, if there's training aspects of my daughter learning how to be a woman, I really look to my wife
Right.
to take that on. And that doesn't mean my daughter doesn't come ask me and I don't offer opinions, because I'm a man and I'm full of them. But whenever possible, I try and stop and think, well, this is not something that you really need me for. Let's bring your mom into this. Again, I think my daughter, I'm super grateful that she loves to come to me for stuff.
I think that's amazing.
At least then I know the door is open, and so
Yeah.
when something serious happens and it is Dad's job, that she's likely to come to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the love your daughter piece comes in, is she knows it's not going to be punitive, and I'm
It's
not going to
safe.
start cleaning
Yeah.
a gun,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really like when Bjorn brought that up.
We've been married 28 years, and what we've done, I think that's been extremely important, is we've shared with the boys that it hasn't always been perfect, and let them know it's like, hey, look, at Mom and I went through a rough patch early on before we had you guys. Frankly, I told them it's like, I didn't want kids, but God said you're going to have them, and now I wouldn't trade it for the world. And I think a lot of it just comes back to helping them understand that, roles are also going to shift throughout time. And so while Dad may take the lead here at this point, but something changes in a dynamic in the family and Mom might take over the lead. And it's not, I think back to Jameson's point, right? We're wired differently. And there's certain areas where, we might take the lead, I'll say just innately. But I said, let them know it's got to go back and forth. And then I think the number one thing that we've really tried to explain to them is that you have to be respectful. Even when things aren't going well, or if you're having a hard conversation, and then also understand how people communicate. My wife and I communicate very differently. She wants time to process it and all this other stuff, and I want an answer right now.
Yeah.
And just like being able to understand that dynamic and slowing down to speed up is kind of what we've shared with them.
Yeah, I like that.
Our communication is different. I need time to process my wife
Yeah.
wants to answer now. But yeah, it's very true though. I think I think arguments are good and healthy, right? And I think, but just making sure to if you're disagreeing, you're coming from a good place of love, right? And showing that in there. And again, if you disagree on something, that's okay. You can talk it out, figure it out together, and come up with the right answer. But I think to not shy away from those tough conversations, but then also
Yeah.
make sure that you're in a good place and you have the time to think and process it. Trying to have those tough conversations at 9 o'clock at night probably
Probably not a good
isn't the
idea.
best answer when you're all tired from the day. But I think
Sometimes your wife has to have it at 9 o'clock
right,
at night.
exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just coming out of a place of love and just ultimately, right, we're meant for heaven, right? And so that's the other thing too, is trying to help make sure that you both get there and your whole family gets there later on, right? And so
Well,
keeping that on your mind at all times as well too.
I like that.
Yeah, right.
like that's going in my head as bring that home.
Yeah, and to me, I think at the core of what Jake and Bjorn said for me is, well, what is the point? Why do we believe that there is man and woman, right? So we can be together as one, and then we're supposed to go forth and multiply. That's the point of one of the big reasons for coming together, in the first place. And so, it's very clear that's what we're supposed to do, to me, and to do that without marriage is just, to me, goes against that core tenet. So to me, so we should be getting married to one person and going forth and creating a family, if that's what's in our laid out for us. And so I'm just trying to teach my kids that, marriage is hard. It's not easy, but you work together in love to continue making it work and grow together, not apart, right? And so I think, the society just turn away from that. And with the divorce rate, obviously marriage is seen as a throwaway thing. And I want my kids to know, no, it's not that. It's a commitment, a commitment before God to be together forever, regardless. And that means it's going to get really difficult. I want my kids to see that it's going to get really difficult, but that you get through that and it gets better because you worked on it together and you honored that commitment. So to me, I think that's part of what's lost, and I'm trying to exemplify for my children, because I never saw my parents really fight. I don't remember them fighting.
Yeah.
So fights with my wife were terrifying at first. It's like, oh, there's a woman really mad at me. I don't know how to deal with this other than my sisters, And so my kids need to see a healthy balance of man and woman and conflict and working through that and staying loving together. So.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, thanks for meeting with me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for asking
Love
us.
the
for the
dad
invite.
stuff.
Yeah.